Welcome back. Today I'd like to talk about a subject which is near and dear to my heart because of my own struggles, and that is how to not be a spiritual doormat. Most spiritual people are very, very agreeable. On the spectrum from agreeable to disagreeable, they tend to be very agreeable. And that's very, very normal in a spiritual life. You're trying to cut down your judgment, you're trying to be kind, you're trying to be conscientious in your own life. But the rest of the world tends to be very disagreeable. So how do we stay agreeable and yet deal with a world around us which tends to be very aggressive and disagreeable? How do we deal with that? And so this one fundamental rule, don't let yourself turn into a spiritual doormat, can be very helpful. I want to give you some ideas and some practices that we can do and some philosophy and actions that we can take in our lives to make sure we stay out of that spiritual doormat quadrant and yet still maintain a lot of our agreeableness. So let's get into it. There's a wonderful story which comes from Yogananda, and it's about a yogi that passes through a village, and in that village they're being attacked by a cobra, and the cobra is coming and attacking the kids and attacking the families and biting them, and their people are dying, right? And so they appeal to this yogi, would you use your yogic powers to do something about this snake? And so the yogi goes to the snake. He says, Mr. Snake, why don't you take up spirituality? Why don't you further your soulful growth and stop attacking the people? And as the story goes, the snake agrees. He's going to become a vegetarian, and the yogi wanders on his way. Well, he happens to wander through the village a year later, and he finds that a group of boys are throwing rocks at this snake because everybody's found out that the snake is now a vegetarian. He's not going to attack them. Those fangs are not going to be used against them. And so everybody starts abusing the snake, and these kids are beating up the snake with rocks. And the yogi shoos away the kids, and then he comes to the snake who's battered and broken and bruised and bloody. And he says, Mr. Snake, what has happened to you? And the snake says, this is what I get for following your philosophy, Mr. Yogi. And the yogi looks at him, he says, well, I told you not to bite. But why didn't you hiss? And that's something to consider. You know, it's not that we have to strike out and be overly aggressive to our own aggressors, but man, can we hiss. Show them that inside of you there's a backbone and there's a power raging through you, which comes from the divine, which comes from your divine heritage, right? You have that at your disposal, this ability to hiss. I was writing a screenplay with a friend of mine, and every time our character would get into a difficult situation, we found that we kept using the same phrase for some reason. So our character would get in this difficult situation, and the first thing that we would write in the screenplay that he said against this situation over and over, it kept showing up the same word in our screenplay, was what? What are you saying? What? This is crazy. What? And so we started laughing about this what, but it's actually quite useful. If you are a very mild-mannered person that never swears and never raises his voice, and somebody comes up to you and starts attacking you, if you will just give them a little bit of shock, a little bit of pushback, it shows that there's a strength inside of you, and it will stop their own psychology from pushing on you, right? So if you try that out, if somebody comes up and they're really bothering you, it's not appropriate, it doesn't feel right inside of you, and you just go, what? And show them that as strength, just a little bit of that hiss, a little bit of that strength. That pushback can be enough that they have to reassess you. So they thought, this is the most mild-mannered person in the world. Boys especially are taught that they cannot maintain a too mild-mannered personality. And so their fathers, when they have this very meek presence, the father will push on them, right? You can't be that way. Man up. Gird thy loins. Do something. You've got to have a little more strength inside of you, right? So the father will push on the child in a very loving, protective kind of way. I got to make sure that you're going to be able to handle the universe around you, right? And so the child grows up in that same way. And when he sees that something is weak, he will automatically push on it to see how weak it is. And so that's what's happening when people see you and there's too much of a mild-mannered presence. They will push on that presence to see how mild it is or if there is a strength. And if you will show them that there is a strength, they will retreat, generally. And so it's not that you have to put this huge aggressive form inside of you. It's that you need a spark. And that spark can be enough to push them back, and then you can return to a mild-mannered presence and then wait. And when they start to push too much again, what? You can show them again that strength is inside of you, and just that little hiss can be enough for them to retreat and leave you alone, give you peace, and allow you to return to your normal, mild-mannered presence. One of my great Aikido sensei was Dick Kabowski, and he was a master at understanding this. And he would teach history to young boys, and they would act up in class, as boys do, and they would get rambunctious, and he would just yell at them and tell them, get out of my class. And they would scurry out of the class, and they would return the next day because it's their class. They have to show up, and they would come in very slow, and they would go, Mr. Kabowski, can I come into your class? And he said, oh yeah, come on in. And the kids couldn't understand. It would give them just a little feeling of, what's going on with this guy? And that ambiguity was enough to put them on their heels a little more consistently in his class and have a kind of respect for him, because they didn't know if he was going to yell at them or love them. And that little bit of ambiguity was enough to help temper the attitude of the class and give him the respect which a teacher is due. Dick Kabowski told me another story. He said one of the greatest tools he ever got from his teacher was that if somebody is threatening you, if somebody gets in your face and they're threatening you, he would say, just stare at their nose like it's the most hilarious and fascinating thing you've ever seen. You just stare at their nose and you just, like there's some great smile. And if you really stare and you really look like, oh my God, this is totally fascinating. Oh my God, this is hilarious. It's just crazy enough that maybe the person will think either this person's crazy or they actually are not afraid and they know how to handle themselves. Either way, I don't want to mess with this person. That was another secret from Dick Kabowski. And again, it's being ambiguous. There's something I can't tell, and that puts me a little more on my heels. So when somebody would attack him, he would stare at your nose, and he would think it was just the most hilarious thing in the world, and that kind of unsettled you. It put you on your heels a little more. Another great story from Yogananda. Somebody came up to him while he was spending time enjoying himself in the park and saw that this guy was a very mild-mannered looking fellow with long hair. He's a little bit strange. But he comes up and he says, hey, give me a nickel. So Yogananda reaches into his purse and gives the guy a nickel. And the guy thinks, oh man, I think I struck gold. He tries it again. Give me a dime. Yogananda reaches into his purse, gives the guy a dime. The guy thinks, this is great. This guy is so easy. He says, give me 2 dimes. Yogananda reaches in his purse, pulls out 2 dimes, gives the guy 2 dimes. And this goes on and on. Give me a quarter, give me 2 quarters, give me 3 quarters, give me $1, give me $2. On and on, the fellow asks for more and more money. And then, when Yogananda had reached his limit, Yogananda said, this guy thought he had found the easiest person in the world. So he said, I'm going to show him a little bit of strength. And so he reached down into his core and he pulled up as much power as he could possibly muster. And he screamed at the top of his lungs. Suddenly, as the guy asked him for more money, he said, get out! The guy dropped all of the money, all of the coins, and just ran. And Yogananda calmly reached down, picked up all of his coins. And a police officer came over to hear what was all the ruckus, and he says, sir, did you have something to do with that fellow? And he says, oh yes. He says, you should be very careful. That guy is not a good fellow. Yogananda says, he and we reached an understanding together. So again, this ambiguity. Is this man easy, or is there some hidden power inside of him? I don't know. And it sets me on my heels. I stay away. I give space. I give respect, because there is a power there. And I recognize it. I can see it. He let some of it out, some of that power. And he did it before things got very bad. He did it tactically. He did it at an opportune moment. He did not wait for the situation to deteriorate to where he was giving away every single possession that he had, where a real anger might come up inside of him. Instead of he did it in a preemptive way. And so if you will push back in a preemptive way, you will avoid the catastrophe that comes if they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until you are in a corner. So in warfare, they talk about tactical ambiguity and asymmetrical response. Sometimes somebody does something and there's no response. And then sometimes somebody does something and there's a huge response. That is asymmetrical. It puts you on your heels because you don't understand it. It's not purely logical. It's ambiguous, and you don't know how to deal with what is ambiguous. What makes sense to us is easy to understand and handle, but what we don't quite understand puts us on our heels. We have to take more time to try and understand. And that's what happens when people push on you and you respond in a way that they were not expecting. Might be through a joke, it might be through humor, it's a pushback, and it shows some of your power, and that puts them back and gives you space and respect. One final master at this was Winston Churchill, and he would formulate responses to everything he could possibly imagine might be said to him. And so you have some of the most amazing quotes from Winston Churchill, and it was all formulated at home where he was at rest and he could think things through and ask himself, what possible things could this person say to me when I propose this bill or I propose this action that our government take? What are all of the responses that might be said to me, and how can I respond to them in a witty and disarming way? And so you have these wonderful quotes that you are like a bull in a china shop. What a fantastic thing to say. He's putting the person on their heels. He's using humor. Everybody laughs, but his point is made and the power is shown. And so he would formulate all of that at home when he had lots of time to think it through. And so if you are coaching your child to deal with grade school and they're a mild-mannered introvert like myself, or even if they're an extrovert, and they're dealing with people who are constantly bugging them or picking on them, what responses can you give the child? Can you brainstorm and work out multiple responses and fill that child's bucket full of tools that they have a response to give in almost any situation which is humorous and funny, and yet it's a little bit of a pushback. So what you'll often find in this social aggression is that there's no real evil intent. An evil intent is to destroy, to absolutely devastate and destroy. But a social interaction is much different. It aims to throw stones, but not to actually maim. And so what you'll find, and what your child might find, is as they show some of their strength, these people that are picking on them might become very friendly and very understanding, and might become the fastest friends. You never know, because the aggression was not actually real, it was just social. So a sociopathic intent is completely different. A social attack is trying to establish who is in the pecking order. That's just the way that humans interact. We have to understand who's on top. And so you come into a group of kids and those, or an office of people, and people will try to figure out who is on top of this pyramid here. We're trying to create the hierarchy. And even if we're not doing it consciously, it is always happening subconsciously. It's just the nature of the beast. So when the child, or when you show some of that strength and you have a response, and maybe it's witty and maybe it's funny and everybody laughs, showing that strength and giving a little bit of that pushback creates a higher status for your child or for you, and suddenly you can be accepted within the social realm that you're in. And it gives you a place of ease, rather being at the bottom of the pile, because you're mild-mannered, kind, understanding, and all these other beautiful spiritual qualities. But there's strength too. And don't forget to show just a little bit of that and help people understand that all of these beautiful spiritual principles are embedded in a bedrock of absolute power, which is inside of you. One of the best stories was a dear friend of mine who I coached through this for years, on and off. About once a month, we would talk about this and coach them through their workspace. And then one day, they decided they're going to call up a psychic. And the psychic said, I'm looking at you in your workplace and you have the most amazing aura. It will expand and push back and then shrink down into simplicity. And I see this happening in your aura over and over again. And it's how you maintain your presence in a workplace, and it's absolutely beautiful. And they thought that was the most amazing compliment. And I heard that and I thought, oh my God, everything that I've been trying to tell them and teach them has come down all the way down into their energetic level, and it's happening all the time. It's this beautiful presence inside of them. There is simplicity and there is power. And don't forget the power, right? And don't let other people forget the power. And so maybe just have a little bit of that what inside of you, and see how people respond when they're pushing too much. So I hope you loved this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of you next time.